It's the Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
All right, it's the Pete Sousa Show. We are in Charlotte, North Carolina, winding down the first day of the ESPN College Basketball Talent Seminar. It's loaded with talent, and as you would imagine, I am at the bottom of that talent totem pole. But it's like from me all the way to like Jay Billis and everybody in between. Awesome opportunity, amazing job by ESPN. Just got back from a really awesome dinner. Very lucky to be here. But I can't do a live show. Literally, they have kept it so jam-packed with like positive information and intel that you really need to know going into this college basketball season. So it's been like an unbelievable barrage of news that you can use, as we would have said in the TV news business. But it's kept me from doing a live show. So right now, we're going to take you to an interview I did over the course of the summer. This interview is with the legend, one of my favorite guys ever, since we're talking about talent and TV sports. We're going to talk to Matt Devlin. This is an interview we did, I think, in July or June. I think it was July, maybe August, I forget. It's late, really late. I got up this morning at 3 a.m., got to the airport, flew into Charlotte, again, like I mentioned, nonstop, but like really cool stuff. So happy to be here, happy to be able to share this interview with you in the brief time I'll be away. Be back with a live show Wednesday morning, or Wednesday, as we say in Philadelphia. But coming up right now, Matt Devlin. Great conversation. Check it out.
It's the Pete Sousa Show. Sports, Pete.
By the way, we've been boys for 20 years. You're like a big brother to me. We go back, literally, it's 20 years now, Matt. 2004 was 20 years ago. So
yeah,
I met you when, you were the Charlotte Bobcats TV guy, but you came from Memphis, and I don't want to go into the Raptors and some of the Baylor guys and another Big 12 guy you have in Toronto. Before I ask you about your experience in Memphis with Jerry West, I know you had a positive experience with him, like most people did, but you had a front row seat to another one of his retooling jobs that went very well. What are your memories of Jerry West and just being around him on the day-to-day?
Well, it was a great blessing for me when he was hired as the president of the Memphis Grizzlies, and soon after that, he hired Hubie Brown. And so there I was with two of the greats. And when you think about Jerry West, he's the greatest executive in the NBA and one of the greatest players of all time. And you think about that combination, and there's just not that many. And people leave out the fact that, he was also an extremely successful coach with the Los Angeles Lakers before he transitioned back into the front office. To be able, during pre-draft camp workouts, for him to allow me to sit with him as he's watching players was just amazing for a young broadcaster. And that's the access that he allowed me. And Hubie Brown also allowed me. And that is rare, as you know, Pete, in covering games, specifically at the NBA level, right? It's gotten over the years tighter and tighter with respect to access. And to be able to sit there and watch him work, learn, talk to him was just a remarkable treat for me. And to talk to him about what he looks for in a player first, and it was feet, and what he thought of different players. And I'll never forget sitting with him after the 2003 draft, and he was baffled baffled that Detroit did not take Carmelo Anthony.
That they took
And
Darko.
yes, and we had a long conversation about that. Um, but he also shared with me his insights on the importance as a general manager that once you realize your mistake, if you make a mistake with a player, that it's extremely important to move on immediately and not let it linger. And he said, once you know it, then you move them because you're wanting to catch another team prior to them recognizing what you know. And so that was just great insight. I mean, the stories go on and on. I could tell you so many different stories, with Jerry and as well as Hubie.
What's the number one story that sticks out to you?
Oh, there's too many. There's too many. But I will add this one, which is a personal one, actually. And you've been around me a long time. If you come in here to my office, I don't have any autographs or pictures of me with anybody, or I've never asked for anybody's autograph. I just, you're in the business, you're there to cover it, and that's it. People ask me all the time, hey, do you have a picture of you broadcasting the game? I don't even have those sort of pictures, And it was after the Raptors won in 2019. I actually went on a trip with my brother and my dad and a couple of buddies, and came back, and my wife actually had framed some pictures of me during the celebration, the championship. And those were the first ever. This is the first ever thing I've ever put in my office, is just because they won the title. So anyway, my father-in-law in 1959 got out of the Army. He's from south side of Chicago, and he and a buddy jumped on a train and went to Los Angeles. And they went to Los Angeles to see Jerry West and the West Virginia Mountaineers take on UCLA at Pauley Pavilion, and in a winter classic. And my father-in-law gave me this program that he still had from 1959. So this is 2005, 2006, and it's got Jerry West on the cover. And he gave it to me. He goes, Matt, I know, it's like, would you think that you'd be able to get this signed, for me? And I was like, oh man, it's my father-in-law. I'm like, yeah, I'll get it signed. Now, I think it took me a year or so, right? And I just waited. It was perfect. It was a summer workout. We were, the Grizzlies at that time were working out at Rhodes College, which is a Division III school in Memphis. And so I sat next to him, and I said, I told him the story. And obviously, as many Jerry West fans and admirers know, he lost a brother in Korea. My father-in-law just got out of service, and I said, in 1959, he and a buddy from the south side of Chicago jumped on a train and went all the way to LA to see you play against UCLA. And I said, he's got the program, and would you mind, signing it to him? And he said, absolutely. And he signed it, and he immediately went into the story of that game against John Wooden and the Bruins. And I cannot tell you what he said to Coach Wooden, but I can tell you this, because he was such, and people will understand this and respect this, he was such a great competitor. He told me how, Coach Wooden was up, and he said, he had his little, scrolled up, piece of paper, in his hand, kind of like, and, double, triple team him, get West, get this, get that, right? And he just said, I'm going to clean it all up. He said, Coach Wooden, Coach Wooden, just sit down. You got nobody that can guard me. And just a great story. I remember Hot Rod Hundley,
Another West Virginia
legendary
guy.
announcer. Yeah, another West Virginia guy. And a legendary announcer, as you know, first in New Orleans Jazz and then Utah Jazz, and he had this great line too. Now you get me thinking about he'd open up broadcasts when he was in New Orleans. They call New York the Big Apple and San Francisco the city. Welcome to New Orleans, the Big Easy, right? But anyway, he and I were talking in the press room before a game, and he's like, Matt, he said, and I was with Memphis at the time. He's like, I'll never forget, because at that time freshmen weren't eligible to participate on varsity. And he said, we had a great West Virginia basketball team. And I don't know if that year, how far they went in the tournament, but it was deep. And I don't want to say it was a Final Four, because you can look it up and find out. But anyway, the freshman team scrimmaged prior to the start of the season, the varsity. And he goes, Matt, Jerry West beat us. And we had a great basketball team. It was Jerry West on the freshman team that took control of the game and just flat out beat us. And I was just like, okay, that guy's the real deal, so.
You mentioned, by the way, those are amazing memories. You mentioned being in the press room before a game. I remember it immediately makes me think of the time when I was a little flaky in my younger years. And I as you well know, right? 12 years sober, you were with me in the dark days. But I can remember, I was a young kid and my head was spinning a million ways, and we're playing the Nets. And for some reason, Marv Albert didn't get the game notes, right? And so there's you, and you're with Marv, who you have a relationship with, and you're calling me, hey, Petey, Marv called you today. You didn't call him back. And Marv is like, with that dry sense of humor, he's like, yeah, I gave you a call. Like, well, you don't call anybody back. I was like, Jesus Christ. And you're getting like the biggest kick out of it. And I'm sitting there sweating bullets, so I can get Scott Lightman game notes and everybody will be cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Game notes. Of course, now you just go, talk about how the broadcast industry has changed, and I've seen this evolution. It will continue. But when I started eons ago in Abilene, Texas, KRBC, Big Country Sports, and I was absolutely horrendous. And then I got into doing play-by-play, and worked in a lot of small towns along the way. But at that time, I used to keep, I spent nearly 7 years calling minor league baseball games as well as other sports, but I would handwrite everything down. You didn't have the internet, right? And you'd go to the local corner store and you'd pick up as many newspapers as you could, even if they were, a day old, but they were from, at that time you're in Texas, or if you're out in California in the minor leagues like I was, even if it was a New York Times or Post or whatever, it could be a day old at that time. And you'd sit there and have a folder of everything, and you're cutting everything, and, you're keeping track of it. And I thought, which now you get me thinking about Hubie, but, the big thing was they had this thing called fax back, Petey. And it was a fax machine, and you dialed in the number, and then the stats actually would come out of there.
I remember I was the very end of that. We had to send the fax back at the end of games.
Yeah, the fax back. And I thought when I got that, I was like, man, But I remember Hugh Brown telling me, he goes, Matt, hey, you know what changed the NBA? I'm like, no, the fax machine. The fax machine. And I'm like, well, fax machine. He said, because prior to that, an advanced scout would call up and say, hey, Petey, here are their play calls. Here's some side out of bounds. Here are the 10 things, 12 things that they do. He said, all of a sudden now, instead of that phone call from a scout going to an assistant, whatever, now all of a sudden, we had the actual plays drawn up, dribble, handoff, pick a roll. Okay, so, hey, here's all of a sudden the 40 series, or, how are we going to handle horns, or how are we going to handle this UCLA cut? And, this is also some of the things that they have off of that, right? Like that's first out, second out, right? And so, here's the things they're running side out of bounds, or whatever it may be. And he said, now all of a sudden you kind of had those in front of you, like, okay, yeah, here are the things that they're running. And then, of course, as you know, now with video, regular season games are being scouted like back in the day postseason games were being scouted. So anyway, I know we kind of drifted off.
No, I was fortunate, but I was fortunate to learn and to be around you a lot, because I write everything down, and I know preparation is just something you can't do enough of. I don't, not to get down a rabbit hole in that, but the more you prepare, the more confident you are, and there's really you can do it forever, which is the gift and the curse.
College football, as you know, and you were my spotter for many years with college football, as well as some NFL games.
Yeah.
But college football, to me, I mean, 1 week, if you have two new teams, I mean, 1 week you could spend a month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, but it's also a lot of fun learning about different players.
It really is.
And,
that's a lot of fun.
Things.
Like I'll find out, here in a little bit, like what my first game will be. And that's the best, because you have a month to sort of like learn, and it's a lot of fun. But like 1 week, I watched you do it. The NFL almost came easier, right? Because you knew the teams, you knew the guys.
Yeah, 53. Yeah, it's like exactly. Your kids are playing video games, so right? So I mean, like it's fantasy leagues, all the other different things. Like you're really on top of it, and I think probably now looking back, I got rid of so many boards. I got rid of all of my minor league scorecard. I got rid of so much stuff just because, where do you put it all, right? And I wish I didn't, right? I wish I kind of held on to some of that stuff. But anyway, some great memories. All
right, let's get you present day here. We'll hop out of the time machine and talk a little bit about the Raptors and guys that in Big 12 country. It really was, I wanted to talk to you anyways about Jacoby Walter. And then I look at the roster, and it's like, wow, like you see that there's all kinds of ties. Davion Mitchell, you got Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shed, a Big 12 guy. But you talk about Jacoby, he's a 5-star guy and he's zero maintenance, like Scott Drew said.
Right.
He's also the prototypical 2-guard. In the NBA. Where do you see him? And I know it's real early for you to even make this assessment, but the team and the offseason. Where does a guy like that have an opportunity to fit in?
Well, if we go back to last season, you think about Grady Dick, also another Big 12 player, right? Yeah. He really took off with the Raptors right around early January. He ended up finishing top 10 in the NBA in corner 3-point percentage. And the development staff that Darko Rajakovic has is superb. Not like just good, and I'm not just saying that. They're exceptional. And when you talk to them, one of the things that they did with Grady was they just simplified things, right? It's, hey, you're a rookie, you're 19, now Grady's 20. A lot's coming at you on the court, right? And so let's try to master one thing, right? And then from there, we're going to move towards the next. And you just keep on working your way down the line. And, one of the things that they kind of pointed to was corner threes. We need you to knock that. Don't worry about anything else above the break. Don't worry about wing threes. Let's just focus in on corner threes. And I bring that up because he also spent time in the G League with the Raptors 905. Now, if you look at the history of the Raptors 905, it was San Antonio, Miami, and Toronto. They truly, from a G League perspective, were really utilizing that to an elite level. And so when you think about the core group of players that played in 2019 when the Raptors won the title, there were many. Pascal Siakam, who just got a huge deal with Indiana. Fred VanVleet down in Houston, not far from you, signed a huge deal there. Norman Powell also spent time in the G League, and there were others as well. And there was this great kind of foundation, relationship, and synergy between what they were doing at the 905 as well as the Raptors. Transition 2020 really changed a lot of that for this organization. In part, when the Raptors, if you heard, it was, they were on their way back. But then you may recall the following season after the bubble, they played out of Tampa, border restrictions, both sides. And so through all of those sort of different just things, right? Some hurdles along the way, the 905, it just wasn't, the
continuity wasn't the same.
Yeah, it just didn't produce. There wasn't that sort of synergy that we saw earlier. And I think that it's getting back to that heading into this season, right? And there also, as you know, has to be a willingness of a player saying, yeah, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to embrace this too. So I would think that he would see some time there, right? Depends upon where he fits in from a rotation standpoint. Grady saw, time there, and then came back and really started to improve. But we're talking about a 19-year-old player.
Yeah.
And and the fans in Waco know him certainly at this stage better than I do. And it takes time. And that's one of the things that when you look at the NBA, the transition to the NBA game, there's Anthony Edwards, right, who popped immediately and everybody knew. He was a number one overall consensus pick, right? And Jacoby, as you know, I think prior to the start of the season, a lot of people felt, hey, he's going to be in the lottery.
Yeah, he was like the fifth pick early on, right? That's what they said in December, January.
Right, and Justin Edwards, who went to Kentucky, was also projected to go not only first round but lottery, and he didn't get drafted, which is a whole other discussion that I have on if you should be allowed to go back to college if you don't get drafted and you have eligibility remaining. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. But so I think for Jacoby, he's in a great spot. Imagine if Baylor was the only school in Texas. Well, the Raptors are the only NBA team in a country of 40 million people. And every game is national. And so the fan base is exceptional, best in the NBA. Wherever the Raptors travel in the U.S., there will be, it's almost like a college team, there will be fans there. We go to Minnesota, people come down from Winnipeg, right? We're in New York, people fly over from Montreal or come down, from Toronto. Boston, same thing. They come from the Maritimes. If we're on the West Coast in Portland, or, California, people come down from Vancouver. So Florida, so many people come in Orlando as well as Miami, Arizona, the same thing. So it's just really great. And he's going to experience all of that. There's an opportunity here for him for sure. This is a young team. They just extended Scotty Barnes, a 5-year contract, Emmanuel Quickly. This is an organization that's looking at, okay, where can we be in 5 years, maybe even a little bit shorter than that, and where will Boston be at that time, right? They have 5 players that they have $919 million tied into over the next 5 years. They're going to be butting up against, that second apron, which is so cumbersome, and how are they going to be able to handle all of those sort of things? So it's a great spot for him to be in. And then, Davion Mitchell, for him, like he had such a great run, as we know, in the NCAA tournament, which elevated him,
Yeah.
right? And you think about what he can do. He can be a disruptor defensively, and this team needs that. This team needs that. Their offense last season, they set franchise records. They didn't win, they won 25 games. They set franchise records on assists. They need more three-point shooting, and they need some guys that are going to get after it defensively. And I think that they picked up, you think about Kelvin Sampson, who, back in the day, did many games when he was in Indiana. He coaches them, right?
Oh,
so that's
yeah.
a good thing too.
Yeah.
Right.
I heard Jamal.
So I just.
Yeah, I had a Jamal Shed game this year, and the thing about him, which I think will be cool, and he could spend time in the G League too, right? But he's the kind of guy, like, guys on the team played for him, just like they did for Kelvin Sampson. He's like a born leader, apparently. Like, the story goes, like, that they had this kid JoJo Tugler. He's still there. He was like 17 for the better part of the year. And if he would make a mistake or do something good, he would look right to Jamal. Like Jamal was like his big brother, and that's the kind of leader he is. So a couple more things for you before I let you get out of here. You mentioned, Grady Dick and Jacoby Walter. And of course, we've been around this forever. Young guys in their teens getting taken in the lottery, getting taken in the first round. What is that? What is the reasoning behind that? Because I think the reason the question is valid now when you see a guy like Dalton Connect who dropped not so far, but far enough where it raised eyebrows. And apparently, the numbers do provide or stand by that argument that it's better to go with younger guys. But why is that, in your opinion? You've been around it for so long. It still doesn't make sense to a lot of average fans.
I think if you look because if a player's performing at the age of 19, like Jacoby is in the Big 12, and you project out, you believe his ceiling is going to be, up here, right? And so an older player, typically, what you're going to get, and it's fascinating you bring it up because I think it's a great discussion. Because if you think about Jaime Jaquez, the Miami Heat knew what they were getting. He may never be a superstar, but you know what you're getting. And, it go back, in history, and I'm going way back now to the 90s and then a little bit after that. You think about, players, Nefi Perez, who played for the Colorado Rockies, right?
Yeah.
He was signed at 19. Well, later it comes out that he was, 4 or 5 years older than that, or maybe he was 3 years older than that. But anyways, I think that, people look at somebody and then it's, project, how do you project out? You kind of know who this player is because he's older, but yet the upside is so intriguing. And why I say it's fascinating right now is because there are older players because of the NIL, because of the extra year, COVID year, that are out there. And maybe those are the sort of players that become more role players, what have you. But every scouting department's still looking for that guy that's going to pop, right?
Yeah.
And Raptors have actually had a lot of success with older guys. Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam was a redshirt sophomore. So it's interesting. It's definitely a discussion that I've had with scouts recently because of Jaime Jaquez fitting in seamlessly. And think about Memphis. Memphis went with Zach Edey, right? Zach is 22 years of age. He's not 19. You know what you're definitely going to get, and then maybe there's a little bit more there. And I think there's a lot more there. I've watched Zach play.
You watched a lot
hockey.
of Big Ten, yeah.
Well, no, I watched.
You watched him play hockey
up here. He's from Toronto. Yeah, from Toronto.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Because he played against one of my sons, who's the same age, way back in the day. He didn't pick up playing basketball until he was like 12 years of age, 13 years of age. He played hockey and baseball. But anyway, so that's, something I have a lot of theories. I share them. One of which is, especially under, today's day and age, I think that, players, okay, declare for the draft, whatever you want to do. If you get drafted, I think they should expand the draft by one more round for sure. I think that, number one, if you don't get drafted, you should have the option to go back to school, because Justin Edwards, who just signed a 2-way contract with Philadelphia, would actually make more money in NIL if he went back. And maybe he wouldn't go to Kentucky. He'd go someplace else, right? Kansas, right? Or some other place. So there's that. The other thing is, I do believe, remember, the NBA has expanded to 3 2-way contracts. So you have 18 players, essentially. And G League players, they have the ability to sign 10-day contracts with whatever organization. But as we know, with this new television contract, there's going to be enough money where, if you could actually have it where it's more set up like hockey set up, or more set up even like baseball from a AAA standpoint, not the lower levels of baseball, because we know what's happening there, which is why a lot of college baseball players are staying around, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of going to the minors, that you set up a G League team, and all those players' rights are with, the big team, right? The big club, and you pay them, you can pay them 125, 150, 200, whatever, you put a limit on that. And then that gives you that chance to develop players. And there's just a gap in there it's just interesting right now, that I think that would be beneficial. I don't think it'll ever happen. I do think with the NIL money, I do think that you are going to see more players deciding to stay in if it's not a guarantee of getting chosen in the first round. So I think that could help the college game too, right? Come tournament time, people's names are you're going to be more familiar. Yeah. Because if you're a high-end player, you'd much rather look at what Zach Edey did. A year ago, people said he pulled his name out of the draft. People thought he was a second-round guy.
Yeah.
He ended up being a top 10 pick.
Yeah. And
he made a significant amount of money at Purdue in NIL. So to me, that's going to help the college game.
What kind of hockey player was Zach Edey?
He was good. Every time I watched him play, I thought, man, he should go play some hoops. He was big, but he moved, and it really helped him foundationally, right?
Yeah.
But he was good. He played AA. So here, there's a lot of different levels. So my middle son started AA, moved up to AAA. So they faced each other when he played AA hockey, which is very good hockey. The highest here up until you're 15 is AAA. And then from there, it's a completely different system compared to, right, I say to people, I wouldn't have known unless I moved here. Yeah. If you look at the rest of the world doesn't combine higher education with elite athleticism, right? It's bifurcated at earlier ages. That's why you have soccer academies, right? You have basketball players in Europe, sign with clubs, right? And then they work their way up that, and then eventually, if they're good enough, they sign pro deals, and they could be 13, 14, 15, 16 years of age. Completely different system. Hockey, a little bit similar, although NCAA hockey's, I want to say that, numbers continue, the percentages continue to increase. But if you think of when I moved here in 2008, 24% of the NHL was NCAA players. Yeah. And I think now it's like 33, 34, 35. It's in that. So that just continues to increase and more and more. So
last anyway, question, you've been in Toronto.
Some other useless.
It's great. It's great. I got one more for you, and this is pertinent to some of these rookies that are coming in. You've been there since 2008. You guys won a title. What's it like? A lot of these kids aren't familiar with how beautiful and how incredible and vibrant Toronto is as a city when they get drafted to it. What's it like for you to see some of these guys? You know, a guy from McKinney, Texas, a guy from Houston, Texas, a guy from New York City, to come to Toronto and experience like, wow, this is like you said, you're the only game in town, and it's a pretty big. It's 40 million worth.
Yeah. So it's, here obviously hockey's huge. There's 7 NHL teams in Canada. You have 1 baseball team in the Toronto Blue Jays. It's a phenomenal city. It's a multicultural city. And I think it's one of the reasons why, if you look at different, throughout the course of the summertime, different festivals they have here, a lot of NBA players come up in the summertime, and everybody, talks about the winners. We're actually, most people, oh, Canada, you're way up there. Toronto, we're 3.5 hours from Detroit, east of Detroit. We're actually below Minnesota. And so Minneapolis would be actually the coldest city in the NBA. And it's beautiful. It's right on Lake Ontario. It's just a magnificent city. It is the 3rd largest city now. I'm going to exclude Mexico City in North America. Behind you have New York, LA, and now Toronto overtaking Chicago. Wow. And it's great. The practice facility is great. OVO, Athletic Center, OVO, obviously Drake. He'll be at games. It's just a special place. It really is. And the one thing he'll get used to is traffic, because there's a lot of traffic. It's not you're not getting from one side of town to the other all that fast, but fortunately, most of the guys kind of live in right close to either the arena or the practice facility. So it's just a special place, and I know in talking to all the different players since I've been here in 2008 that have gone on and played in other places, they all, hold this place dearly to their hearts, because it is rare. It's a place where an entire country,
the nation, right? I mean, the world got to see that in 2019.
Yeah. And it's, when you start thinking about the numbers of people and the ratings and stuff that we have, it just far exceeds, like when you compare it to the U.S. and you multiply it by, the amount of people that are, watching here. It's just really special, right? The big difference between here and there, though, is that, it's not, you're not going to turn on the TV and watch a Saturday, football game between Baylor and Texas, right? So it is those 7 NHL teams. It is, that NBA and the baseball team. And what I mean by that is you're not going to watch Western University take on McGill University, right? I mean, there is some of that, but it just doesn't have, that college game day. But our sport has that, which is really fascinating.
Yeah. You're the man, Matt. I appreciate your time.
You're the best, Petey. You're the best. You certainly put your finger on a lot of the right players back in the day when you were my spotter. So I appreciate you.
I don't know about all that. If anything else, you and I were raised Catholic, right? You're going to have an easy time getting into heaven. I because of me. Your patience and tolerance was to the nth degree. One time, I remember, I had just gotten sober. I tell this story. So my head was kind of spinning. The first trip I ever took was with you. You took me to Purdue. It was a Purdue football game, and I felt good. I'm a year and some change sober. But, man, the bullets started firing, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And finally, I remember, and this is the I've learned to be so patient with spotters because I was so terrible in this moment. I pointed, a guy 44 scored a touchdown. You know, they got all these double numbers. And I pointed at 44 on defense, and you just looked at me. Like, you didn't say it. You were so pissed. Like, how the hell could you point to that? And then you just say, hey, Petey, why don't you go over there and just stand over there for a little while? Huh? Cool off for a minute. And you stuck with me. And then I bounced back, and we had a great we got to do Michigan State that year. Because remember, we did NFL on Fox with God rest his soul, Siragusa. Those were great moments, man. I remember.
We had a lot of fun.
I learned this from you too, and because I've done this not on even close to that level, but I remember we were in Arizona for a Cardinals game. We were in Oakland. It was Raiders Cardinals, and Matt Leinart was like questionable, and ultimately he didn't play. But they really wouldn't give us access. And there he was pregame sitting across the field. We were down the field, and you're like, I'm going over to talk to him. And you sat down and you talked to him for like 15 minutes, and you didn't get like any illicit information, but you talked to him about his injury. It was a totally cool deal. And I was like, wow, you can do that? You know, you can if you do it the right way.
Yeah. No, it was great. You and Mikey, Stats, and the times we had together, and Coach Glenn Mason, former head coach of University of Minnesota, who we did a lot of games with. We had and John Jansen, who does stuff at the University of Michigan. We just had a really good crew that loved college football, loved football, banded together and put on the best show we could possibly put on. And as you said, the highlight was Michigan State. Michigan won with a field goal at the end in front of 15,000. And that was one of the craziest stories ever, because I remember saying, getting the schedule, and it was just so hard to balance the NBA plus the college schedule, as you know, and I looked at it and I said, oh man, I think we're going to be in Montreal on Friday night. Classic announcer move, right? So I said, hey, look, I have a game. I have a game Friday night. It was against the New York Knicks. I have a game Friday night. So I'm going to put, and this happened a couple of times with you. You were great about getting there and being in the meetings, taking notes and stuff. And this is prior to Zoom and everything, or what are we on, StreamYard today? So, you call up and I just put, I think you put a phone in the middle of the room and I was just taking notes, asking questions. That's how we would do like the pregame. And I remember that for the Michigan State, or, the meetings. And so anyway, I never told them though that I was actually in Montreal. The game was in Montreal. Okay. Now, because I told them, I said, look, I'm there. Don't worry. It's a 3 p.m. kick. I'll be there. Don't even worry about it. Okay. And they're like, okay, yeah, fine. I said, you don't mind that I missed the meetings on Friday. Petey's going to be there. He'll take notes. I'm going to take notes. I'm going to call in. He's going to put his phone there. We'll get everything. Yeah, that's good, Matt. So I had my boards. I think I had Michigan State early in the year, so that kind of helped out. So I remember
we had Michigan State,
Montreal.
Indiana.
I had an event. Yeah. So the long and the short of all that is I had an event on Thursday night in Montreal. Then the next day, I'm getting ready for the Raptor game, plus Michigan State. And it's all predicated on the fact that, all right, after this game, that team charter has got to take off and get us back to Toronto, right? Which it did, and we landed like at around 12:30 in the morning. And I had my car there. I already had everything ready because I drove from the airport to Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is about 4.5 hours from Toronto. And I got to the hotel, the Marriott in Ypsilanti, if you recall.
Yes.
I got there at 5 in the morning. And then I slept for about 5 hours, woke up, had my gallon of coffee and got my notes all ready, and
well, I got a steel
then
trap for a memory. You
we
said,
went and
hey,
did the game.
you said, hey, can you maybe to take a weight off me, like you can fly into Toronto and we'll drive together. You can drive me, and I'm like, oh, like I don't have a passport. You go, well, that plan's fried.
Well, at some point we got to compare. We got to compare, notes and all these different. Because I threw out a board, and I was thinking about it the other day. I was listening to Riley Green, right?
Yeah.
We did a Jacksonville State game.
Yeah, against Ohio State.
Against Ohio State. I remember writing down Riley Green, the name, and I'm like, I would think it's him. It's 15, 16. Maybe longer, however many years ago.
I think it was 2014. It was Jacksonville State at Ohio State. And it was one of those deals where Ohio State really, really blew the doors off them. But it was cool because Coach Mason was back.
Was he on that?
I think so,
was he on that roster in 2014?
I don't know.
I don't know if he was.
Yeah.
But I was like, oh, man, I wish I had the
board.
I wish I still had the board.
Yeah. Great stuff,
anyway.
Matt. And by the way, I can tell you for people, like I never even knew, because I still have a long way to go, but like those moments, time I spent like right next to you, you really do like that was something that was golden for me as a play-by-play guy. You just know how to handle yourself and know how to act and know what to react to. I was very fortunate. So thanks again for putting up with me.
I appreciate it. Well, you kidding me? Thank you. I mean, we've known each other a long time, and, you're awesome at what you do. And I'm so happy, for you. And as you and I both know, every now and again, we're able to see each other when we're down in Texas.
Yeah.
And, those are always a lot of fun. And the best are, looking back. And it's what I love about doing what we do. Everybody gets together, tries to do the best they can for the show, and have a great broadcast, and then, do it all over again, and so there's just so many great stories, Petey. Did you ever tell the Penn State story with the broken arm?
No, you go ahead. So
No.
I mean, which part? The fact that you and Coach Mason spent the night with at Joe Paterno's house, or the fact that I got drunk and hopped the fence and broke my arm? I was 2 months before I went to rehab. I can clip this part of it and put it on the podcast I do about sobriety. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'll just never forget, because those were 12, because that would have been Eastern time. So it'd be a 12 noon kickoff, 11 a.m. Central. You get there 3 hours before. And I just remember getting to the broadcast booth at State College, and I want to say, did you, because typically you would drive us over there and stuff like that. But
that's scary.
I think that day, you drove us. We're at like the Courtyard Marriott or something. And all of a sudden you show up and your arm, you have like a brace on it. I don't even know if it was a cast yet.
No, it wasn't a cast yet. I was supposed to fly back to Charlotte, but I flew from State College to Philadelphia. I had a connection, and I had my mom pick me up, and we went to the hospital. Hey, I was there the next week.
And I was like, Petey, I'm like, you're all right. What happened last night? He goes, well, I just,
And then literally
jumping over. I was climbing over a fence, jumping over a fence, and I fell. I think, why? I'm like, why were you climbing over a fence?
So then at the end of that season, that's when I went to rehab. Yeah, I missed the last like 4 games or something. Yeah. Here we are.
Oh God, and here we are. But to tell you how and this is what I admire you so much as a friend, and also you always wanted to do right. You always wanted to, even when you're going through all of that stuff, I'll never forget, and you mentioned the Arizona-Oakland game, and, part of the thing was, you would drive, right? And for anybody out there, Petey's not the best driver, okay? And so you actually practiced the drive route over to Oakland Coliseum, because we were staying in San Francisco, And I think the next morning there was a marathon or
It was
something.
a San
So you just
Francisco
wanted to
marathon.
make sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're driving.
So that just says a lot about you.
We're driving
Even when you
over the
were going
bridge.
through all this stuff.
We're driving over
Yeah.
the bridge, and again, I'm not the best driver. Sarah Goose is riding shotgun, and his buddy Ed Toner puts the back window down because he's going to get sick. And Sarah Goose goes, "Dude, do you have a car?" And I was like, "No, I don't have a car." He goes, "You need to go back to Charlotte. You need to rent a car, and you need to practice." But he did appreciate that everybody was thrilled that I did the dry run because I wanted to get it right.
Yeah. No, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. Well, look at Petey. You're the best. Appreciate you, buddy. And so happy for all your success.
Well,
really
I'm sure you'll be talking me through some stuff this year. So I'll hit you in a little bit. A couple weeks, we'll catch up. Thank you so much, Matt.
You got it. All the best. Happy for you.
We are Rogue Media Sports.